That's a design decision. That's not, it's not an aesthetic decision. It's not a function decision per se. It's the economic aspect of this is a design decision that should be factored in and balanced with the aesthetics and with the function. As you said, you could have a bit of a smaller home, and because it's smaller, that frees up economic resources that you may have, because if you're on a limited budget, to then improve the aesthetics or improve the function. And in one sense, you could improve the function by, adding a air purifier onto your HVAC system or something like that. So you're giving up something and you're getting something, and you're creating a balance that is artistic in the sense that it works for the building and the individual who's requesting this design. So these are, in my view, design decisions that architects should be directly involved in. So when it comes to talking about budget and trade-offs, and the term that I absolutely makes my skin crawl is value engineering, because it's neither value nor engineering, right, unless the design professional who created the design is involved in that decision-making process. So,
ironically enough, during the early days when I founded, I put together Emerald Dream Builders as a company. One of the things I ultimately wanted to do, in looking after reading EFAB and understanding it, was I came up with a model. And EFAB was kind of a big part of that. So a lot of builders would say, you don't need an architect to do this. In the state of Massachusetts, you obviously need an engineer to stamp your structural part of it. But I could design a house, and I do have plans on my site, Bill. But what most, until people come forward and they say, hey, I really like this design, or hey, I really want to do something with this, the model is, I put these designs on my site primarily because I want somebody to start with a design that's relatively green from the start. So if they like one of the floor plans on the site, they're going to start with something that they like, and I know because I designed it that it's going to fit into some sort of green program, some green factor. But the reality is it was never meant to be a end-all, be-all where I take the plans, get them stamped, and build it. No, the next part of the model is is to bring it to an architect to balance it for both aesthetic purposes, and you know what? Obviously, you know who my number one architect is.
And you know what? We're coming up on our second break now, so we're going to continue with that. I have some comments about that when we come back from our second break. This is Green Better Best on Voice America's Green Talk Network. Hey, welcome back to Green Better Best. Rick Goyette, you still with me?
I am. Here I am.
All right, now, where did we leave off?
We left off with talking about the model for Emerald Dream Builders. I actually have design plans on there, and the point of my conversation is that the plans are out there to have a green starting point. I know that the design are going to fit many of the LEED criteria. Should a client wish to choose LEED, but it started from the EFAB design philosophy of, well, we need to, if we're going to start. You have to consider sort of everything and balance them. But what I found as I've gone along, and part of my model is to, once the house, a floor plan is agreed upon, it goes to an architect for obviously, for just kind of tweaking it on an aesthetic perspective, because that's what, that to me is where I think the forte is in terms of determining, tweaking the function. I've already made it so that the design layouts are green. You get my point there, Bill?
Yeah.
But one of the things as I've gone along throughout this process is that I'm too green, and it's almost unbalanced towards making the home design and floor plans absolutely green. And I had a hard time until I sort of started using EFAB as a lens with which to review my decisions. You know what? It can't always be one-sided. I can't focus on the green in the same way that other builders out there shouldn't be focused on putting as much space out there for the cheapest amount of money. Unless you find a balance, the building truly, is not going to be. I don't want to use the word perfect, because is any building ever perfect? Bill? Actually, don't answer that, because I'm sure you probably have one or two that you.
No, but some of what you just said illustrates the difference. The way a builder approaches a building and the way an architect or an architectural designer would approach the same subject. because you talked about you have some plans, plan layouts up on the website in order to kind of show people what the possibilities are.
Exactly.
And I think that's a great way to begin a design dialogue. And you and I have had private conversations about this as well.
Yes.
To me, you're creating an object of art, which is architecture, creating this home for a specific user. So there's no way to have the information in advance of interviewing the user as to how that home should be designed to fit the needs of that user. Mm-hmm. So I would take a step back from that as an architect, and I would say, okay, it's great to have some plans up on the site for the purpose of showing people what's possible and what might not be possible, with the layouts and such. But I would say, that's fine. Let's say we have John Smith who's looked at that and he says, well, I kind of like this one. The next step for someone like me is not necessarily trying to lock in the floor plan and move on, but to actually go back to square one and say, John Smith, what are your needs? What do you know? How big is your family?
Right.
How much space do you feel you need? How do you feel about lots of windows or less windows? How do you feel about different levels? And
now you're pushing my buttons with the windows. But go ahead.
Oh, sorry. But all of that takes me back to to the beginning. So we have you've shown someone something, but now we have to go back and find out what is it that they really need to fulfill their requirements. And that ultimately will result in a balance between aesthetics, because the object you're designing for the family, or we're talking about a home. We're essentially talking about homes here. Mm-hmm. Is got to be aesthetic from the standpoint of the architecture. It's got to provide that ecstatic joy that you get from aesthetics for the person who you're designing it for, as well as the architect too. You should be, you should enjoy what you're doing as you're creating this, and then you need to balance that aesthetic with the function to make sure that the home will function and support the family and the family's needs. Sure. And then finally, the resources that are available to create the design need to be factored into the design decision-making processes early on, so that when you're done with the design, you actually have something that the user, that the client can afford to construct. Now, this is not an easy thing to do. Obviously, a lot of times what would happen is you would develop the aesthetics, develop the functions, and then develop the design documents, and then be costing it out either near the end of the design process or at the end of the design process. But what I realized early on is that you can create a much more harmonious balance in the entire design if you factor in these three factors together right from the very beginning.
And what's interesting too is that EFAB does not take on, the design philosophy does not take on a specific style. It's not colonial. It's not French chateau. It doesn't take on a particular style. It's really focuses on the indigenous architecture for wherever the house is going to be built, which I find is another interesting part of it too. Another factor of my plans is they may not fit into a neighborhood of Victorian homes. But again, it's just out there to see what's possible, and ultimately, I want to start with a green design instead of having to reverse engineer it and having them come with a design. Or ideally, they come to you first, Bill, which is fine. But you're in New Jersey, and I'm here.
Well, I am a firm believer in the integrated approach to design. I love having the builder at the table while we're discussing the implications of aesthetics and functions, and the builder can bring to the table the logistics of construction. I'll give you an example. We have, let's say we want to create a large room with a long span, and we don't want necessarily have beams to be deep and dropping into the space. There's a logistical issue there as it relates to how do we get steel in there? We're talking about cranes, and we're talking about these things. If we address them early on in the design, maybe we can devote resources not to craning in steel, but developing a different structural system to create the same or similar aesthetic, and balance that with the function of the space. So you have the appropriate balance. You have that equilibrium between the three factors. Now, you talked about earlier it not being a style-based method or philosophy, and the reason why that's important is you would certainly have a different styling or a different aesthetic if you were building, let's say, in the mountains of Colorado versus the suburbs of New Jersey, and you would.
I've done both of those, by the way.
Excuse me?
Done both of those.
Oh, very good. So you're a very experienced builder. But if you're going to integrate aesthetically into the context of the mountain scene, you're certainly not going to build the same looking or same style home that you would build in a flatland area. So the idea here is to have a set of governing principles to create balance in design, but not tie it to a particular style like modernism or contemporary or colonial or any of the other neoclassical. I mean, you can achieve efab, Econo-Functional Aesthetic Balance, in any styling you wish to create. And that's important, and I wanted that because I as an architect myself did not want to be locked into creating my own signature style that then I would then repeat over and over again with little modifications. I want total creative freedom, and to have total creative freedom and to be able to create homes and buildings that have achieved this balance, to me, is very liberating.
Yeah, that's what they call the vernacular efab too. It's a way of taking what you need in a particular area, or maybe what you want. Maybe it fits to put a French chateau in the middle of Main Street in Hillsdale. Maybe not. But
well, there's nothing wrong with a French chateau per se, if that's the desire of the end user, if that's the desire of the client to create that, that should be, and it's appropriate to include that in your thinking about the overall design. And of course, there are details that are associated with that affect the economics of the project. And
you don't want to get caught with the seduction of the aesthetic, Bill.
Well,
you want to suffer from the seduction of the aesthetic because it throws it off balance, where the primary focus is only on what the house looks like.
Yes, you have to. There has to be a balance.
I'm throwing out your words, by the way. You like it when I do that, don't you? Seduction of the aesthetic. I took that one. That's not those aren't my words.
Yeah, you got that from my discussion. But
I did, and you know what? People should take a look, and you can take a look at it while we're on the air here. It's www.wjmarchitect.com. 2 clicks away from actually the whole definition of the philosophy, and hopefully you'll be able to use it as, incorporate it into your own design philosophy, or find somebody who will incorporate it into, if you're somebody out there thinking of building, or if you're a builder, you can take a look at it and understand kind of where they're coming from on the architectural side. I'm sure, not all builders and architects get along as well as we do, Bill. Did you know that?
Oh, we get along? No, but I have had many discussions on building sites and before, with clients present and without the clients present, with builders, and it's amazing. As I explain this, it really seems to strike a chord with a lot of builders that they're very interested in design, but they don't. It's hard for them to get their hands around design because they're focused so much on the logistics of construction. I have been told by more than one builder that they enjoy the idea that the architect is listening to them and is thinking about the issues that they face in the field in creating the design. Of course, the proper balance in design, the buildings come together much more seamlessly. They come together much more logically. And the builders in particular can appreciate that very much, not to mention that the end user, the clients are happy that their buildings are done on time and with fewer problems because these things are all factored in.